prove that, all you have to do is download on your iPhone the gravity meter application and see that on the ground, before you get on the plane, gravity is minus 9.8 meters per second squared. That's the actual acceleration due to gravity at sea level here on Earth. But when you get up into an airplane, you might notice that the gravitational acceleration, and I did notice this, isn't minus 9.8 meters per second squared anymore. It's like minus 9.5 meters per second squared.
Interesting.
The gravity is less because of the altitude. The farther away from the planet you get, the less and less the gravity is. So that by the time you reach, say, 250 miles above the Earth, if you were stopped dead, you would, of course, come falling back down to the Earth. But if you maintain a certain orbital speed, you continue falling toward the Earth, but your horizontal motion offsets it just enough so that you form an orbit and you go around the Earth. And thus, when you're in that orbit, you don't drop to the floor of the space station. You're weightless. Okay? And that's because of the fact that the gravity is less and less. But it's not zero in Earth orbit. In fact, if you were to shut the gravity off, you would, if you were to stop your velocity and could hold your spaceship there without circling the Earth, you would actually slowly fall down to the bottom of the ISS space station. You'd fall down to the bottom and just sit there. You'd still have gravity, but you wouldn't have a lot. It's reduced in the intensity. So when you're in space, it's basically controlled falling when you're in orbit. You're falling because the ship, the ISS, is circling the Earth at 17,500 miles an hour. That's the speed required at around 248 miles above the Earth, such that the force pulling you down to the Earth is exactly balanced by the horizontal motion of the spacecraft and thus canceled out, making a perfectly circular orbit. So as it's pulling you down, you're also moving horizontally just enough so that the curve of the horizon stays the same distance below you. So the horizon or the ground stays the same distance below you. And that's kind of orbit in a nutshell. And that's kind of what that's not anti-gravity. That's actually fooling it. That's actually fooling gravity because it still has gravity. Obviously, if the Earth didn't have any gravity that could be felt out there, the Moon wouldn't stay in orbit. I mean, the Moon is held by Earth's gravity. So, but it's a weak force, and I know that seems odd when you consider that Pluto is so many billions of miles away, and the Moon's 240,000 miles away. So you think, well, hey, I think somehow that gravity must be the strongest force there is. But in fact, it's not. It's actually the weakest force. Strong forces are actually inside atoms, believe it or not. It's very strong, and these forces inside atoms are actually quite strong. And that's really kind of the conundrum that people have to understand. They don't, because atoms are so small they can't even see them. Yet the forces are pretty powerful, because when you bang on your desk because your computer is malfunctioning, your hand doesn't go through that desk, does it? Well, that's because the molecules made of atoms on that material have really powerful bonds. They're very strong. You can't break them just by hitting them, and that's the really cool thing. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Now, before we continue, Mark, are you planning to stick around for a bit?
Yeah, I can stick around. Why? You got to go to a commercial?
No. I was on with Richard Dolan, by the way, last night.
What'd you say?
I was out with Dolan last night.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, for a few minutes. And I'm gonna actually mention what we were talking about to you in a minute, but I just want everybody to know that we're going to be carrying this audio now on P&K Space Imaging. So if we can, just mind the language a little bit.
Hello to everybody over in Keith's chat.
Hi.
Also, I want to just read this out because it has to do with Mark and it has to do with Pine Bush, and this is part of the press release, but this is something that's not on the Pine Bush UFO site. This is from
exclusive.
Yeah, this is Jennifer Stein, and she sent this out to those parties that are involved, with the media aspect of it all. This is what it says. Pine Bush, New York celebrates its unique history at the 7th Annual Pine Bush UFO Fair, Film, and Conference, May 19th and 20th. This year's Friday night award-winning film, Travis, the True Story of Travis Walton, will be shown at 7 p.m. at the Home 2 Suites at Middletown by Hilton. and it's 600 Route 211 East, Middletown, New York. So that's, again, Middletown by Hilton, 600 Route 211 East. And that's Friday night the 19th, which I believe Mark will also be in attendance for that.
Yes, I'll be there. I know Jen.
And they're going to have a Q&A with Travis Walton that follows the film. And now, as I'm sure some may be familiar with this, but Saturday on May 20th, the parade and fair is from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time in downtown Pine Bush, and it features family-friendly festivities all day on Main Street. Serious enthusiasts will meet at the speaker's tent where notable experts discuss UFO history and beyond, which Mark will be in attendance as well at Pine Bush during the day and be at that table in the tent. And here is the speaker schedule. Now, it's going to occur. It's going to be at the location at the Catholic War Veterans Hall in Pine Bush. So that's the Catholic War Veterans Hall, and that's 161 Center Street in Pine Bush. So 161 Center Street in Pine Bush. Tickets are $10 at the door, and here are the speakers. From 5 to 5:50, none other than Mark D'Antonio will be discussing exoplanets.
I know him.
So Mark is going to be going on speaking at 5 to 5:50. From 6 to 6:50, Peter Robbins will be discussing the life and work of Bud Hopkins.
Awesome.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, well, that is going to be interesting. And 7 to 7:35 is Kate Dovelson, Close Encounters and Implants, as we know that she's a lot of her...
the magnet lady.
Yeah, the magnet lady. And then 7:45 to 9, Travis Walton, Saved by the Light. So those are going to be the speakers at the event. And again, it's at the Catholic War Veterans Hall at 161 Center Street in Pine Bush, Saturday, May 20th. And Mark is the first speaker, and he will begin at 5. So hopefully everybody will be going there if you're able to and you're in the area. So I know we're all going to be there, most of us.
I was going to say there's going to be some other loiterers as well that people
I'll be
would
there.
like to meet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be there.
And then here's the little thing, though. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to actually... We might be able to stick around tonight, but we're also planning to do a live moon stream from here Saturday evening, which P&K Space Imaging will be broadcasting on their YouTube channel. As well,
Paul and Keith are going to be up at your house, right, along with us?
Mm-hmm. And they're going
right.
to set up all the equipment outside. Hopefully the weather permits that can happen. And
I know that.
Yeah, I will be streaming the outside party on my channel. So when Mark is so when Mark's out there with Paul, Keith, all of us hanging out, they can come to the camera with a mic and say a few words, and you'll see what's going on behind the scenes of everything that's going to be going on. So it's going to be a great night. It's going to be a great day.
That's so cool.
We should do a fire pit roundtable thing. Have Paul and Keith in the background with the telescopes, and then in the foreground you got the fire pit. And
I've
we'll
got
be talking around the fire pit.
That's a fantastic idea.
I've got the fire pit.
Yeah,
So the fire pit's in the backyard, but I could always move it to the front. I've got those flat 12-inch stones that I could put it on. Yeah, I could definitely do that. So so
I
it's
make
going
a
to be
portable fire pit because now at the observatory, I just finished it, and I've already got on May 3rd. I'm supposed to do a live stream with podcast UFO out there, and then this Saturday I've got the Discovery Channel What on Earth folks coming out. I got to do season 5 of What on Earth.
Wow.
But we're gonna use the observatory as a backdrop for some of it, I think. And that's the way they're talking. I don't know how it's gonna actually turn out.
Oh, they must love you so much.
They like geek out too, and because they've come out so many times, it's always different people. I'm getting the same people coming back again. Like this time, the people coming out are people that have been here before, which are very interesting because, they know their way around now. And so I don't have to say, well, if you have to go to the bathroom, you don't need me to show you. You know where it is. Go.
Nice. Make yourself at home, yeah.
I know. I do that. I'm very much that way, if someone wanted to rob me blind, they'd probably be in luck, because they just have to pose as, someone that's, here to do an interview. I had someone drive out from Pine Bush, actually, last week to do an interview.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, a guy from Pine Bush actually came out here, and I said, "You're gonna drive like 2.5 hours to just talk to me? I can do that over the phone if you need it. I really feel bad you drive all the way out here, And she said, "Oh no, I'm gonna come out." So he did.
Wow.
And he got
to see all your toys.
Really?
Well, he didn't see an observatory. I mean, he only saw was a pad in the ground at the time, or the pier. But I was working on it when he drove up the driveway. Anyway, but no, these are good. These are all good things, and Pine Bush will be fun this year.
It's gonna be fun.
The movie Travis is just phenomenal.
Yep.
Travis Walton is a very soft-spoken, wonderful, genuine person. I like him.
Chat.
We're gonna try to
Peter
convince him.
Robbins is a great guy. I know Peter very well, and I spent time with both Peter and Richard Dolan a few weeks ago in New York City, where I had to talk at a conference there.
Oh, at the expo. Yeah.
Before this, so they're all good, and you might, I don't know, you might do well to bring Peter Robbins in on one of your streams, and then have him talk about Bud Hopkins and other things.
Yeah.
Rendlesham, he's great with that. He knows all about Rendlesham, which I don't. I pay attention to current cases.
At conferences like that, I mean, obviously whoever's holding the conference has the rights, but could you not talk to them and say, I want someone to film this to put on my specific YouTube channel? Because now that you're going to be streaming, right?
Well,
just an easier place for your friends to find your.
I'll be recording it all anyway.
Well, that's what I mean, but you do them so often, it would be nice. I've seen a few up, but for the amount you do, it would just be easier if there was one place to find them, and it would be good promotion for them because, if Mark was at the show, I wonder who else they got, right? So it would be, I don't know. I would take advantage of that. You're there sharing information, and why not? Or at least if you can't get the whole thing, at least your portion, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's all a good idea. I mean, I think, and you know how I am. I like to, whoever's involved, I like to actually, spread the wealth, so to speak, and get them out there as well, because I think that the universe and the UFO field are big enough for all of us. There needs not be one front runner, and that's why we have guys like Stephen Greer come along, and people look to him as the Messiah. It's if you saw my post on Facebook, you'd see that I think he's anything but.
It's cultish. It's cultish, and it's
actually
it's like a scam.
Peter's funny on Facebook too.
It's like a scam artist. But I wanted to ask you this, Mark, because there was that big announcement by NASA last week about
I talked about that yesterday.
This question.
I talked about that yesterday on the Connecticut UFO show. There's a TV show that I'm part of, and I help write for, and I actually do a segment on it called "The Science of It All," and I actually talked about yesterday when we taped. I actually talked about Enceladus, which is where you're going with this, and the potential hydrothermal vents on Enceladus. Now, yes, well, what does that mean? How do we find them? I mean, why is that important? Okay, of course Enceladus has some latent heat in it. Of course we know that. Well, we didn't know that, and it's 300 miles across, which is not very large. In contrast, Jupiter's moon Europa, all right, is 1,900 miles across with a 100-mile deep ocean. So Enceladus having these geysers, and Europa having these geysers, it's really interesting that we have two moons of similar activity, I should say. All right. So maybe what we see on Enceladus could be mirrored in triplicate or more on Europa. But what we saw on Enceladus was this. We saw the geysers coming off Enceladus, and what happens is, you know how Saturn, moon Enceladus we're talking about, Enceladus circles around Saturn, and as it goes around Saturn, Saturn's pull is constant, tugging on it, basically. But other moons circling around Saturn pass by Enceladus in its orbit as it's going, and that passage by another moon farther out tugs on Enceladus and kind of squishes it just a little bit. So it squeezes, goes back to a ball, squeezes, goes back to a ball at certain points. Now, that motion has been repeated for eons, okay? And it's what's called a resonance. For instance, a moon can go around the main planet, like Saturn, say twice. Okay, and in that time, the next one out might go around, once. All right. So the closer they are, all right, the faster they have to orbit the big planet to stay in an orbit. So there's a resonance, and sometimes they call these. They'll say it's a 2-4-6 resonance, or a 2-4-8, or a 1-4-9, a 1-4-8 resonance, or something. That just means that in succession the moons go around relative to each other once. Once on the outside to 6 times for the next one to 4 times for the next one. So every time this one goes around 4 times, this one goes around 2 times, and then 1 time. It's a in decreasing number, and because it's farther away, slower to go around. And with Enceladus, this resonance issue with these other moons, tug it and squish it, like I said. But every time they do that, these little cracks open up in its south pole, and it spews this icy water. And for one season of I think it was NASA's Unexplained Files, I actually, besides talking about Enceladus, I had to actually create a model of Enceladus, and I have it here in my special effects shop. I have a big acrylic ball that on one side is Enceladus. It's all made up to look like it, and I have these little tiny holes drilled in it because I had to simulate the geysers, or as the British call them, geezers. I never got over that. It's like geezers, okay, like old geezers. What are you talking about? So anyway, I simulated that, and I pumped in using a fog machine here, an effects machine. I pumped in just 1 psi, one tiny little bit of overpressure of this smoky stuff, and it just came streaming out of those holes, and it just, oh, that is lovely, that's brilliant, oh, I love it. So that ended up getting filmed for that episode. And then they showed a squishy ball showing how when you squeeze the ball, this coating I put on it would make cracks that would open up, but then when you release the squeezing and it goes back to round, the cracks vanish. And I said, this is exactly what's happening at Enceladus. It shows how the other moons moving around on the outside can actually squish it from time to time. So Enceladus shows these geysers now, or geezers if you're from the UK. And when it shows these geysers, one of the things that we saw in these geysers was hydrogen. Now, we're used to seeing water vapor because they're mostly water vapor. I'm sorry, ice particles, ice water, basically, and water vapor. But mostly, that's what we saw. But hydrogen was there, atomic hydrogen. Why is that important? That's important because it says that there is something else going on in that moon. Maybe we're seeing evidence of hydrogen gas that's being created at the bottom of Enceladus's oceans, all right, in the bottom where it's rocky, perhaps, and this little primordial soup, so to speak, at the bottom of the oceans. Maybe that's part of creating, this hydrogen, part of the hydrogen sulfide. Maybe we're seeing hydrothermal vents in the same way that we see them here on Earth, but just on a much smaller scale at Enceladus because it's only 300 miles across. So that's fascinating because that means that if we see that we have chemosynthesis or chemically sustained life here on Earth at these black smoker vents deep off the Oregon coast and the Juan de Fuca Ridge, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, these big chimneys might also be recreated on Enceladus. And thus, could there not be microbial life there using chemical sustenance rather than photosynthesis like plants, in the same way that we see the chemical sustenance going on here at our black smokers deep under our oceans? So we're drawing these parallels. Now, they may not be right, but seeing the hydrogen gas is really a boost to life hunters because it looks like we're seeing the same kinds of things that we see at our ocean vents. That's why it's so exciting. Long-winded, I know.
That is very exciting. That was nicely explained, too. I could actually follow along.
As the lady said, we've got shrimp.
What'd you say?
I leave serious. As the lady on the announcement announced, pardon that double word.
Your mic is a little low. Yeah.
We got shrimp, she said.
We got shrimp. Yeah.
Smaller than shrimp, I'm sure.
But on Enceladus, they might say, oh, they're intelligent shrimp, and they're saying, stay away. Leave us alone.
And I was going to drop a really, really deep question, and hopefully it wouldn't set Mark off for too long. When you were talking about anti-gravity, a lot of people then get into the idea of things in the sky. And how does gravity play an effect within atmospheric pressures, or does it?
Actually, we talked about that with Richard Crandall, and my feeling turned out to be the same thing that he was suggesting. It doesn't matter. In the same way that it doesn't matter if it's deep under the ocean and subject to deep ocean pressure from the water, because the way this works is the craft is surrounded by a warp bubble, much like the Alcubierre drive, okay, which is that other drive concept that NASA's actually got a funded lab for. I know that if you have a warp bubble around your craft, then nothing within that warp bubble is going to be affected by the external atmosphere, water, land. I mean, I don't even know whether these things should burrow in the ground using a warp bubble, but that would be pretty telltale and pretty violent of an upheaval. So most likely that's not doing that. But it shouldn't matter, actually, and that was kind of interesting to hear that. It kind of reminded me of the time when I was on a nuclear submarine in 1994, not as a sailor but as a guest. And you've heard the story, some of you, and that was that I actually saw on the sonar screen with the sonar tech that was there, the sonar kid, I call him. Okay, he was a sonar technician. They saw a very quiet line go across the sonar. And when the executive officer was called in to look at it, they basically said, the kid said to him, "Sir, it's moving at several hundred knots. It's barely making a sound." And they said, "Well, we have to confirm it. I mean, is it a machine anomaly?" And they looked at the sonar I was sitting at, because I was seasick, to be honest. And I was sitting there trying to just calm my stomach. All right, so I didn't belong there. I just sat down there because it's quiet out of the way around the control room. And he turned on the sonar next to me, and it was already in play because there's a bow sonar, and then there's these towed array that they tow behind it, 10 kilometers behind the sub. And the sonar that he looked at on my screen was also showing it. And he says, "Yeah, no, the other sonar is showing it too. It's a real thing. It's not an anomaly. It's not fake." And then the executive officer, the XO, he said, "All right, well, log it and dog it. So log it and then hide it." And then I told you, remember how a few years later I had a job I had to do for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And the vice chair of the Joint Chiefs became a friend of mine, and he's second in command of the Navy. And I said that I had an occasion to sit with him at his home in Maryland one time when I brought down a project I had just finished. And I asked him, I said, "What can you tell me about this fast mover program?" Which is what these things are. These fast movers are in my parlance, I thought they were torpedoes, but the fact are they're actually unknown submerged objects. And I said, "What can you tell me about the fast mover program, Admiral?" And he looked at me and he says, "I can't talk about that program, Mark. I'm sorry." And I've mentioned this to you. And the thing is, to me, by saying nothing, he said everything. That was like, wow. I was stunned. So I drove back from Maryland like, "Oh, wow," shaking, like all excited, looking like an idiot on the highway. But that kind of thing is prevalent. So obviously there's stuff going on in our seas using technology far beyond, and maybe it's this warp bubble anti-gravity type stuff. And Richard Crandall talked about how this anti-gravity can propel a ship. Again, the ship sends out an anti-gravity or a gravity wave, and the gravity wave interacts with our gravity and it shoves it along like a wave would shove along something on the water. So it's basically borrowing gravitational energy from the Earth in order to work. But that doesn't answer how they work in deep space. And the answer there is that they act more like this Alcubierre drive, where they need a lot of energy to make these warp bubbles, and then they actually compress the distance between them and their origin or their destination where they want to go, and they lengthen the distance between them and where they've been. And that little folding process is how they travel through space in these hops, these discrete hops. So that's a little longer probably than you wanted me to go, but I mean, that does kind of answer the question from what I heard yesterday.
That Richard Crandall, did he write They All Told the Truth?
That's the book. It's
Anti-gravity
700,
papers?
700 pages long and very dense reading. I started reading a little bit of it, and I was like, wow, that's this guy. If he's onto something, that's great, or if he's on something that explains it. But the bottom line is he's definitely lucid. He's certainly making a statement, and he was recommended for the Nobel Prize too by the people he worked with, because they thought what he's showing was so revolutionary. But the problem is that science as a whole, they don't really give him any attention. They don't respect it, and he's talked to over 300 physicists and so forth. But he can be a little bit abrasive, and he comes off a little bit crackpotish. But he's not. He's not a crackpot. He's sane and he speaks normally. But to a physicist, when you say the word UFO, when you say anti-gravity and interstellar travel, it's again, thanks to the media, guys like us and others get pigeonholed into this, tinfoil hat brigade. We got to wear tinfoil hats. So that's part of the problem with Richard Crandall.
Okay, sorry, I just put the link in Bill and Keith's chat.
Oh, there you go. You
Richard
did.
P. Crandall, Crandall.
Yeah, the book's not cheap. I mean, I've seen it going for as high as $450 and as low as $95.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
on Amazon it.
$95.
No, I must have read it wrong. I thought it was actually quite a deal, but maybe I wasn't really looking.
Okay.
I thought it was like $11. I guess I'm wrong.
Oh,
Never mind. Don't.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's right. But 700 pages.
Oh my God, no, 109.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, Canadian.
Typically,
Sorry, Canadian. 109.
That's okay.
Canadian. Yeah.
I've seen it for $95 American.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's crazy. So I think that's pretty cool. And I think it would be neat to be able to explore the whole anti-gravity question and stuff like that.
He's also done interviews, so if you don't have $95, you can hear bits and pieces.
Yeah, and you can actually see him on our show. I mean, you can see him on the Connecticut UFO show as well, because we did this. It was actually the first time we actually did a Skype interview on the show. But it's there, and there's three of us. There's Warren and Mike and I, and usually it's Mike and Warren, but I joined them for the whole show because they were going to be talking to this guy, and they wanted to have an additional person that could do a counterpoint, kind of a good cop, bad cop, because we were kind of prepared for him being a little abrasive, and it turned out he was anything but. So it was actually wonderful. But then I did my Science of It All segment, and I talked about black holes, in fact, and then Enceladus. So I did Enceladus at the beginning of the show, and we talked about black holes and this gravity wave that was seen. And it was captured by this two observatories, one in Louisiana and one in Oregon. I'm sorry, one in Hanford, Washington, and it's called the Laser Interferometry Gravitational Wave Observatory, or LIGO, LIGO. So just remember LIGO. That's the best part. And both of these observatories caught this gravity waves being emanated from this black hole collision and merger. Really, really cool. And I just thought it was just neat, because this does really start us down a whole new path of science, you see. Mm-hmm. This takes us into a realm that, changes textbooks. Confirmation of Einstein's theory of relativity was a big one, because when we photographed stars during eclipses, and you saw that the stars were actually slightly shifted in their positions because the starlight was shifted by the gravity of the sun. That was pretty much proof that light particles actually have mass, because mass can be affected by gravity. If that's the case, now you saw that the starlight was bent and refracted. That means that all the light hitting your face is actually pummeling you at a very low level, of course, with very, very lightweight mass. And thus this again takes us to this place now where we can't look at our old physics anymore. We have to consider that there's some new elements coming out, including things possibly like Richard Crandall's anti-gravity theory. I'm not hawking his book, believe me, and I haven't even bought the book, okay, because it's just like, well, that's too much money for something that may or may not be true, but it might be. He's certainly speaking cogently, and I'd love to see some of his stuff put to the test. I really would.
At least it's a starting point. I mean, no one has any other better theories, do they? Even if he's wrong, tests might lead to things not even considered, right?
Yeah, right, Amanda. As a matter of fact, not only that, but there is no other theory. There is no anti-gravity theory. He is it.
Exactly. It's all new. It's a new way of looking at things.
This is the other point as well. With anything that's right on the cutting edge and well beyond it, just because one person can kind of quantify what they're trying to put together, even if they make it explainable, it's still beyond a lot of other people.
That's right. Consider Stephen Hawking. Okay, Stephen Hawking is a near quadriplegic, right? And people say, "Oh, poor Stephen Hawking, poor Stephen Hawking." Well, he wasn't always like that, but he became that because of this debilitating disease. But the fact is, when he comes out with something, people just suck it up and say, "Yep, that's it." And why? Because he's broken through that. And in a sense, maybe because of his prior successes with predictive physics, okay, they accept him more readily. Well, people that come along who have no quote unquote history, no record of tenure at a university, no particular expertise, might end up having an uphill battle, just as Crandall does. And again, he could be completely off his rocker. He could be wrong, but I actually, I listened to this the talk. I listened to everything we did with him, and I kind of felt to me like he wasn't being untruthful with us. He was actually saying stuff that actually made sense from a perspective of someone who understands astronomy, science, and particle physics to some extent. I'm not a particle physics guy. I didn't like quantum mechanics. I didn't like studying atoms and stuff like that. I much preferred the macro side. I much preferred looking at the objects. I liked deciphering what these nebulae were and what they did. My thesis, in fact, was on stars of a certain type that were speeding out of our galaxy at high speed. Really sexy stuff, if you're an astronomer geek like I was. That's about it. So, I think that's what he. So I give him a chance. I give him a chance. I don't criticize. I want to just, I just want to give him a chance to be heard. And I think that, he's onto something. Just like Bob Schroeder. Bob Schroeder wrote a book called Solving the UFO Enigma. Bob's a good friend of mine. And I believe that he is onto something with the way the UFOs actually work. He and Crandall are not too far apart, yet they come at it from a vastly different perspective. Bob Schroeder believes that UFOs are disk-like in many cases because they're particle accelerators, and that they accelerate certain particles to a certain velocity, and they get a certain particle that's a result that actually allows them to leave our dimensional space and go into, in string theory, the bulk, the in-between space between what we call our membrane, which is our galaxy, our universe of X, Y, and Z all moving through time, and go into this middle netherworld called the bulk. And if we're there, then the rules of space-time don't apply. There is no speed limit anymore. And this is what Crandall says, too. He's talking about the same thing. I really think they're talking about the same thing from two different perspectives.
Do they know each other?
They don't, and I'm going to make that happen.
Yeah.
Because I would like to see this. I'd like to see them get their heads together. Now, Bob Schroeder's an aeronautical engineer. He's not a physicist. And Richard Crandall's a physicist, not an aeronautical engineer. Okay, so together, I think they can work this out together from their perspectives. Now, they each wrote a book on the subject, and I think that if they put their heads together, they might actually come up with something that is digestible by mainstream physics.
Yeah, quite possibly meet in the middle somewhere with a good outcome.
By the way,
Exactly so.
Well,
by the
great.
way, Mark,
I mean, this.
a friend
Yeah,
of
Bill.
mine, a good friend of mine, her name is Carol Call, and she's the host of Epic Voyages. I don't know if you're familiar with that show.
I've heard it, yeah.
Well, she's enjoying listening to you right now, and she's hoping that maybe in the future she can get you to come on as a guest.
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to do that.
I will definitely let her know that. So they're listening, and she's a great person. I've known her for years, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with her doing a show. So I'll let her know, and we'll set that up off the air.
Okay, is she like over in the P&K side, or is she on your
No, she's on my
stream?
she's on my Skype, and she just messaged me that she's been listening, and she's really looking forward to possibly having you as a future guest on Epic Voyages.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Another connection, mate.
I've heard the show.
That's
It's
what
a
we like.
fun show.
I'll send you privately her contact.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you to Carol. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry
thank
I
you, Carol.
interrupted and totally threw everything off, but I just wanted to let
No,
you know.
you didn't. I talk too much anyway. You know, I can shut up for a while if other people want to.
I know
No, because
that.
there'll be dead air, Mark. No.
Oh, you know, we can't have
It's
that.
just going to be another question to you. So,
Mark, I saw.
no, like when you start streaming, why don't you? I'm throwing all these ideas at you, like you're not busy enough, but like invite your two friends on and have a roundtable and say, "This is his theory. This is his theory." Because like, even if they're coming at it from different angles, could they, not being from different professions, kind of do the tests for the other person, like
Well, you
do
know
the
what?
experiment on their behalf? Like,
I was thinking that would make a lot of sense, but here's the problem, Amanda. When I start streaming from here, I'm going to be fully involved in making sure the technology is working
Exactly,
and up
yeah.
and running. So I'm going to have Bill handle the moderating between these guys and have Bill do all that work, and then I'll just handle all the equipment. So you see, Bill's going to end up hosting my stream too.
Oh,
You see?
boy.
I don't think I told him that, did I?
Oh, whoopsie.
Oops.
It's all news to me.
congratulations on their promotion, Bill.
There was a question from Ron. How tall is that observatory, Mark?
If I had the observatory just right on the ground without a pier, without any kind of a base, from ground to the top of the dome is just about, I'd say it's just under 8 feet. It's an 8-foot diameter dome, so it's actually very large enough for an instrument and 2 or 3 people actually in the dome. I was actually walking around the space this morning as I actually finished the dome this morning before going to New York City. And I had to be in New York for 4 o'clock, and then I got back here like 2 hours ago or so. And so that was, it's an 8-foot diameter, and then just like I said, just under 8 feet tall. It's really nice. It's ABS plastic, and it's all preformed. The parts overlap and lock into each other, and then you screw them in.
Also, it's relatively easy to put together. It's like a sort of a flat pack.
Okay, I'm gonna modify that sentence a little bit. Only in that, maybe it would have been easy if I had someone helping me. But
yeah.
I had to, I had some help for one day or so, and we got a lot done that day. We got all the walls up and everything, but I didn't have any help for the base. I didn't have any help for the pier. The metal pier was actually constructed by my friend Russell at the local metal shop, and he welded it up for me and said, "Here, have fun." It's like, great guy. And it's a professional quality pier with everything is locked precision. But and when I say pier, that's the steel part that sits on top of the concrete pad that's underneath it.
That's the word I was looking for earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wrote it in the chat. I wrote pier.
I saw it,
pier.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the dome took some time because the shutter, it's called the shutter, the thing that closes and then opens on the dome, and that shutter took some time to get laid in there right. and it uses some like rollerblade wheels to actually roll the dome along. So they're actually very quiet and very, very smooth. And these wheels had to be adjusted just right so that you get the right bit of roll. But here's a nice thing about this observatory: it's fully automatable. I can buy an automation package for it, and then program. I was a programmer in my previous life, and I can set it up so that as the telescope moves, because I can tell the telescope where to go and go look at the Orion Nebula, and the telescope will go and point right at the Orion Nebula. But
So
if the dome doesn't move to match it, what good is it, right? So
Yeah.
I have software that can actually, will actually do that. We'll move the dome to exactly the right spot in the sky, so that the opening will be right where the telescope's looking at all times. And then there's
question then
And where
be,
did the
Yeah.
dome come from?
which
Canada.
when it comes
She had to get
when it
that
comes
one.
to having this technology built into it, are you going to stop short of voice activating to say the words "make it so" before it moves?
Yeah, it's like observatory. Go to the Orion Nebula. Make it so, or I can have it say engage, and then have another voice in the background saying, "Captain, we're on our way to the Delta Aquarius system." Just for fun, whatever.
You
Thank you,
have
Mr.
21
Data.
seconds to comply.
Make it so, number one.
So when are you going to start streaming, Mark? Would you have a plan or any kind of idea?
Yeah, as soon as as soon as you get it going with me.
Well, I'm ready. As long as it's not
Wow.
Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays because of KGRA.
No. I'm see, but that's the thing. Maybe, and this is what I want to do with the streaming. You got your star streams and all this stuff, which is great. Paul and Keith have their moon and Jupiter streams and sun streams. What I want to do is I want to do a stream where we go to different objects in the sky, and then I tell people all about this particular object. Like, this is a planetary nebula. Well, it's a planetary nebula.
That'd be awesome.
Well, it was named that way because it was so it's not mistaken for a planet. It's a planetary nebula, but it's not a planet. And what is it? Well, it's the remnant of a dead, a star that had sloughed off its outer layers in its final life. And talk about the specific objects. I have a few to choose from. I mean, we get thousands of objects in the sky. And my telescope is big enough so that I can capture the light, and because I have the same camera that you do, Bill, essentially, then we'll be able to actually take stream actual shots of these faint nebulae and clouds of gas and dust out in space that actually look like something on the screen other than just a little blob. And we'll see these things with some really reasonable detail, especially in the telescope. So I have a feeling it's going to be nice.
Nebula. It's just beautiful watching nebula. You can't beat it.
No, you can't. I mean, I won't have any views that rival the Pillars of Creation, for instance, that the Hubble took. But I will be able to tell people all about the nebulae and what they do and what they mean. I mean, nebulae are, because you can see them, is because stars are exciting the gas, around them, the hydrogen gas mostly, and the glow can be red, okay, which is what's called hydrogen 2, okay, doubly ionized hydrogen, or blue, which is just reflection, maybe of a blue star. The Pleiades are an example of those. I took a photo one night of the Pleiades, and you could see these blue. Those are the seven sisters you see in Taurus, the bull, near the shoulder of the bull, and those seven stars are very blue stars. They're actually B-type stars. B doesn't stand for blue, but they're the second hottest type of star there is, the O being the hottest. Well, these B-type stars are reflecting on a lot of this dust that surrounds them, and that dust is being these little tiny dust grains in the micron size are reflecting the blue light of these stars, and so it's aptly called a reflection nebula. And you get a lot of this. You see reflection nebulae that are slightly different colors here and there, but mostly you see and are familiar with the Pleiades, which are this blue reflection nebula. And if I want to show that, we can actually, during the winter, put the telescope on the Pleiades and do a nice stream setting on the camera, which I'll set dynamically in the dome. And I can actually set this, I can run the camera through my iPhone or through the iPad, by the way. I can do everything with run it with the iPad, which is great. So I don't even have to be out in the dome. I can run the camera right now with the iPad, which I do. And so you can actually stream and set the settings so that you can get a nice view of it. And then right there in front of your eyes, you'll see it get brighter and brighter and brighter. And
we're pushing the frontiers.
Take pictures with it. And people that are watching it can actually save the images and actually have photos.
Yeah.
Now I belong to the SLU, which is a consortium of people that actually get together and use telescopes in the Canary Islands and out in Chile to take photos. But the exposures you can take are only 5 minutes long or 10 minutes long at the most, and you reserve a slot for your object that you want to take. And it works great, but they kept upping the prices per month, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it myself. And when I get the observatory out in Arizona, I've already studied the dark sky maps for Arizona, and I've got a couple of places out in Arizona that are just so unbelievably dark you can't see your hand in front of your face.
Oh, that's gonna be great.
And I want to get some property out there and put this observatory on it. And that's the goal, and it'll be a remote observatory. Now, this is the kind of thing that I think is not only in my future, but I'm probably going to move there too. I actually want to live in Arizona because I want to have a starry sky every night when I go out. I just want to be able to have that. Even during the day, I want starry sky.
there's quite a lot of very affordable land, and I know this because it was looked into by a friend.
That's right. That's right.
In the Wallapai Mountains.
Yeah.
He was actually going to do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking out in Wickenburg, or I've been looking at places in Wickenburg, in Congress, Arizona, in Cornville, Rim Rock. I'm looking at all these different places, and I won't consider any places that have any light pollution. I'm only looking for places that are either right at the very end of the light pollution grades, from brightest to dimmest, or that are actually out in the area where they have no reading because it's just fully dark. Because if you've ever been under one of those skies and had the opportunity to look up in one of those skies where all you could see is stars, and where any clouds in the sky were black against the stars, I've seen this. When I was actually out on my cousin's fishing trawler during the summers, I would help him on his trawler, and I got sick as a dog. I got seasick all the time, but I just could not resist being out in the grand fishing banks at 3 a.m. and just looking up. It's just stunning, horizon to horizon stars, and the Milky Way was so bright you could see every little nuance. It was incredible. Well, that's what I'm after. I mean, that's what everybody should be after. It's just a beautiful sky, and doctors were even saying that the light pollution, and the dark sky. Dark sky is actually an ecosystem. They're actually calling it by the name of an ecosystem now, and there is medical evidence that a dark sky does enhance health. Don't ask me how. I don't know what that's all about because it's not my expertise. But for my health, I know that it enhances it. No doubt about it. You just have to see a dark sky to believe it. And once you see it, you'll never look back. You'll never want to go back to a bright region again.
Mark,
really don't know
I'm gonna read something to you, and it's off an article off of the New York Post, and it involves an astrophysicist at Mount Stromlo Observatory, and this is what he's saying.
Mount Stromlo?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's saying that it's now estimated that 1 in 5 stars have planets similar to Earth, and that there's an average of 100 billion stars in a galaxy, and that there are about 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. So he's saying, based on what we see of other galaxies, 100 billion makes sense, and 1 in 5 stars has Earth-like planets around it. So we're talking about 20 billion Earth-like planets in one galaxy alone. Extrapolating that out of the whole universe, that means that there are up to 40 billion trillion potentially habitable planets out there. Even just in our own Milky Way, there are believed to be between 300 billion and a trillion stars, meaning 60 billion to 200 billion ones with potential Earths holding the right conditions for microorganisms. Now, here's the numbers about this. How likely would bacteria and simple organisms be to form intelligent life? We don't know. But even if it's 0.001%, you still get tens of millions of planets. Just go by the numbers, he says. Even assuming that 1 in 100,000 probability, that would mean 600,000 to 2 million alien inhabited planets in the Milky Way alone.
Basic law of average, yeah.
I say, I've been actually for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been talking about how, depending on which estimate of the number of stars in our galaxy you believe, anywhere from 100 billion to 400 billion. And when I say believe, I mean there's research to indicate that 400 billion is a number, 200 billion is a number, 100 billion is a number. So, no one can agree yet on how many stars are in our galaxy alone. But as Carl Sagan said, there are billions and billions of stars.
That's
and that's kind of what this is all about. But
that was done well,
when you look at that possibility, now you have statistics on your side. Right, and that's what he's talking about there. And I've been preaching that for years, actually, saying that, it's a statistical thing. It's not whether you believe it or not. You do believe in statistics.
Yeah, based on numbers.
And that's it. Looking at the numbers, like he says, and that's in fact chapter. Well, let's see what chapter 1. Chapter 1 of my book is called "The Problem with the Numbers," and it talks about the actual numbers that we have to deal with in terms of astronomy. When we talk about astronomy, we quickly get massive numbers that are beyond human comprehension very quickly, because of the nature. Okay, I mean, just the distance to the moon. Okay, it's a 6-digit number, 240,000. Okay, and then that's a long distance. It's a big number, and that's just to the moon. Now, if we want to talk about this, how far is a light year? Well, it's 6 trillion miles. That's how fast light, at that speed that goes, light gets 6 trillion miles in a year. Well, how far away is Alpha Centauri? That triple star system is 4.3 of those light years away. So now you're like 25 trillion miles. You're already talking about, just to talk about the nearest star. So, statistics and numbers can also kind of numb you to the actual values. When you hear, potentially 20 billion habitable planets, that number doesn't mean much. The number is hard to visualize. So that's our failing. That's as human beings, our evolution has been such that we never had to deal with billions of anything. We only had to deal with binocular vision with eyes set a couple inches apart so that we could detect threats. Out to a certain distance. But then beyond that, our eyes are useless. We can't detect the right distance without a proper reference, like a tree way in a distant mountain or something. So our own evolution prevents us from actually looking at our own numbers and saying, wow, that's impressive. You just hear a big number and you say, wow, that's impressive. But the fact is, we don't really know what 20 billion looks like. Right. In fact, when the Titanic sunk, how many people died there? 1,100, right? It was like 1,100 and some odd people died on the Titanic. Well, people heard, over 1,000 people died in the Titanic. But to really show what that meant, on the docks that it left from in Ireland there, they put 1,100 people on the docks and then took a picture. This is how many people died. And that was sensational because people could see and associate a volume with how many people say died in the Titanic.
Visuals, yeah. Yep.
Yes, it became something they could now digest. And when we hear, 20 billion possible planets, and actually the number is between several 100 million to 40 billion habitable Earth-like planets in our galaxy alone. But the numbers are so disparate between each other because we don't know how many stars are in our own galaxy. We have some good ideas, and like I said, it's between 100 and 400 billion. So you pick. I look at it this way, and this is a rule of thumb that will probably turn out to be pretty factual. You can consider that any galaxy, no matter what its size, 10% of the stars in that galaxy will be suitable for planets and have potential habitable planets. 10%, and when you consider a galaxy like ours, then that's why we get numbers like 40 billion or 10 billion, at the low end. But it's most likely someplace in between. Now, our galaxy is big, but guess what? It's one of the smaller ones. It's not that big. It's big, but compared to some of these giant elliptical galaxies, what they call they're big round galaxies, but they're called elliptical galaxies. These things can have untold trillions of stars themselves. And again, the 10% rule also probably applies there. So, the universe is populated, and that's why I believe that it's a populated universe. That's the title of my book.
Mark, when you think of trillions of galaxies and what's inside each galaxy, to try to comprehend those numbers.
Exactly. Well, that's why there's a problem with these numbers. Our minds can't comprehend these things. Now, here's an example. Okay, I'll just tell you real quick. When you consider the size of a star, the diameter of a star, our sun's 864,000 miles across. Okay, so just under 1 million miles across, right? Well, you don't really know what that means, but you also don't know how far away the stars are from each other. So let's just take a look, say, at Alpha Centauri. Now, Alpha Centauri is made up of 3 components: A, B, and C. C is called Proxima, and A and B are stars kind of sort of like the sun. One of them is more like the sun than the other. But it's a little bit bigger than the sun. So let's consider the diameter of that star. Now, that star is more than 1 million miles across. Now, why, when we look at it in a telescope, with the most powerful telescopes that we have in existence, can we not see the Alpha Centauri A component of that system as a round disk in our telescope? Why is it always just a little tiny pinpoint of light and never a disk, never in recorded history? The answer comes, from the fact that it's far away and you can't see it except for the tiny little pinpoint of light. You can't see the disk of the star. And when people say, well, why? I give them an analogy. If you have a quarter, a 25-cent piece, and you want to move that far away from your eye or from your telescope, your powerful telescope, the distance you have to go to make that quarter the same diameter as Alpha Centauri A is in your telescope, that distance is 765 miles. So that little tiny round quarter would have to be 765 miles away from you to see it as a disk at the same size as Alpha Centauri A. So that gives you an idea of just how vast it is. And that's just to our nearest star, not counting the sun. So that's just to the nearest star. So 765 miles is far away. And when you think about, having taking a quarter and taking it down to, northern Florida, okay, and then having a telescope here on Earth that could actually see it as a quarter still, we know that's an impossibility. We don't have anything that can do that. And that's exactly the problem we have with trying to resolve stars to disks in the sky. We can't see that.
And Mark,
I always to this day picture the scene at the end of Men in Black. With
a little louder there, Heidi.
We're playing with little loud, did you say?
A little louder. Get louder. You're quiet.
Sorry. The scene at the end of Men in Black with the aliens playing with the marbles that are galaxies within galaxies within galaxies. It's just
right.
And there's a bag of marbles, which is each marble is a galaxy within a galaxy.
That's absolutely right.
A wee bit mind blowing.
Yeah. And you know what? I know somebody I know said to me, "How do you know that our whole universe isn't just a black box in someone's living room?"
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And the thing is, Mark, now with what's going on with And so there's a shooter on the screen. Lyrids looks like we're going to have some activity tonight.
It's waking up.
With the Saturn's moon and also Europa, it's just not the planets. It's the moons too.
That's right. And we should have known, because when the Huygens probe landed on Titan, we discovered an incredible amount of basically chemical soup that reminded us of the primordial Earth soup, just in frigid cold. So you have to say, wow, there's hydrocarbons on the surface of Titan. These hydrocarbons could very well be, or are the very much the same hydrocarbons that we have on our planet here when we were in primordial mode. And it's just that it's not warm enough. So the question is, if Titan was in a warmer climate, if it was in a warmer climate, could it actually have promoted life? Titan's almost a planet-sized moon. But because it's orbiting a planet that's just so much bigger, it's called a moon, right? So it is trapped by Saturn. So the fact is, Titan probably could have harbored life as well. It's just that it's in a forever, perpetual, frigid state. But there are extremophiles, life forms that live in extreme heat and extreme cold. And I think that, the jury's still out on whether Titan can support something like that. We've only just, it's like dropping something by parachute from an aircraft onto some place on the Earth and then using that to determine what the whole Earth looks like. That's silly. Okay? But we did just that, and then we have the aerial orbiter Cassini that was actually photographing Titan at various times. I mean, it was stunning, And if you haven't seen it yet, go online and look at the descent video to Titan from the Huygens orbiter. You can actually see in 3D the descent to Titan taking place as seen through the cameras of the Huygens, and you can actually see the area around the Huygens where it was landing. It's just an incredible video. It took a while to get it took a while to get that video put together.
Mark, do you think that the research that's going on in Antarctica could be related to possible future missions going to these harsh conditions on other planets or
absolutely
moons?
Absolutely. There's active research going on now in the dry valleys of Antarctica, because those dry valleys are the closest analogy to Mars. Now you say, well, Antarctica is covered with ice. Not everywhere. There's actually dry valleys on Antarctica that are just dirt and soil.
Yeah.
And there's no ice there at all. It's absolutely bone dry. Okay? Drier than Patagonia. Okay? So the issue is, how do we survive in such dry conditions? Well, we would survive in such dry conditions if we have ways to do so. And the only way to find ways to survive in such dry conditions is to